McCreary here, Amvest Capital. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Silver Viper Minerals Corp. Silver Viper trades on the TSX venture as VIPR, and the OTCQB is VIPRF. Hope you'll enjoy today's program. It will also be available in replay mode about an hour and a half after we wrap up today. A few housekeeping notes. You go here, you can ask a question of management. We love questions sent in, and we'll ask them straight away. And over here are important links to stock pages, their website, a copy of this presentation in PDF, etc. And then finally, please only fill this out at the very end. You can only do it once, but there you can put your feedback, and that'll get to Steve very quickly. With that, of course, Amvest is a New York-based specialist management corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. And again, the disclaimer of this call is most definitely for informational purposes only. And I'm going to pass this over to you, Steve. Take as long as you want.
Thanks, Campbell, and thanks everyone for taking time again to come in here and hear the updates or hear the Silver Viper story for the first time. We've had a great relationship with Amvest now for years, and we're looking forward to continuing that relationship. We see a lot of value in these webinars. We've had a lot of great feedback from existing shareholders or new people that are reaching out on the back end of them. So I'll dive right in. I will be making some forward-looking statements today, so I'd like to draw your attention to that slide. When you're looking to invest in a precious metals, explorer, I think there's three things you really should focus on. One, that it's got a high-quality asset. Two, that it's got lots of potential. And three, that it has a strong management shareholder group behind that. I think you'll really see, why we are all three of those things. There's a summary here on this page, but I don't want to get lost and spend, too much time on this slide, and we'll just go right into the presentation. The project is our main project is the La Virginia project. It's located in eastern Sonora. You take a paved highway from Hermosillo to the local town of Nacori Chico. From there, it's about 30 minutes in on a well-kept gravel and dirt road. Here you can see the claims as they stand right now. We own everything in red, 100%. We acquired that from Pan American for a 2% project-wide NSR. And then you can see in blue where all the historic work was done, and the bulk of where our work at El Ruby has been done. And you can see that back-end loaded option agreement there. We've made the first 3 payments. We have 2 to go. Obviously, the last one is the big one, and half of that can be paid in shares at our discretion. The historic work where Minefinders and Pan American did over 50,000 meters was focused on an area down here, just kind of in the bottom. You can see I'll circle in yellow there, but La Virginia, Com Virginia, and Las Guatas. When they were drilling on the project, they were using large track-mounted rigs. They were having a lot of success in that area. And what ended up happening was they ignored the rest of a very large land package. When we got involved, we were the first ones to sample the project up at El Ruby. Since then, obviously, we've done very extensive mapping and sampling programs and identified additional new targets, which we'll be testing here, shortly. And obviously made quite a major discovery at El Ruby itself. Part of the reason they didn't get into this area, one, was the success they were having. And like I said, they were using those track-mounted rigs. And there is an arroyo between where you can stage from where the camp is at La Virginia. You stage up at the kind of northern end of Macho Libre. There's an arroyo, and then you get this flat plateau that is El Ruby. So they ignored it. They didn't go out and map and sample. It was something when we were doing our site visit and evaluating whether we should be trying to get involved with this project that really excited us, because there was no mapping, sampling. They hadn't drilled, and there was these obvious targets that, run in the same system that, the area they were drilling on work. You see them outcrop. The system outcrop is these large silicified dikes. The mineralization happens adjacent and into those silicified dikes, and they stick out of the ground like a sore thumb. So we knew there was a good chance that we were getting involved here, make, multiple new discoveries. We've certainly got one major one out of Ruby. We've put some reconnaissance holes in a couple of the targets and hit mineralization. I wouldn't classify them as a discovery yet, though I think we're definitely, in the right area, and we are going to find more at El Molino. Macho Libre is very interesting. The 2 targets that we're going to be identifying, we'll talk about later in the presentation, but that's La Colmena and Paradonis, which will be tested shortly. So very exciting project, very, friendly option agreement, and, we continue to work year round on the project. Here you can see a picture of El Ruby and that plateau and taken from where you stage, to get to the project. We're actually going to be building a new camp down here off of the western flank of El Ruby, which will get the drillers even closer to the project and make accessibility a little easier. And we've actually found a spot where we think we can get a road right up in El Ruby, which is nice. Again, we're sitting here in the eastern side of Sonora. We're up in the Sierra Madres. Most of this particular trend is highly underexplored. This project was found when mine finders went looking for another Dolores, which is the mine that they sold to Pan American when they were bought for $1.5 billion. They settled on La Virginia being the lookalike to Dolores, and there definitely are a lot of similarities between the two, especially, now that at El Ruby and what we're seeing there. It's almost carbon copy of what they have at Dolores. The only other modern operation in the area was the El Tigre deposit. It was a past producing mine, which is now an exploration project that they're trying to revamp and grow that project with silver tiger metals. But in between, there's nothing. There's been no modern exploration. A lot of this area has poor accessibility. We're really lucky where we are at La Virginia that we can get into there very easily. But for being that remote, we definitely have very good infrastructure. We've got a brand new power line corridor that goes right through the middle of the project. We've got water year round that runs, on these various creeks that run, in these arroyos. We got the local town of Chico and Mesa Tres Rios the other direction. It is very good from an infrastructure standpoint, especially when you see where we are up in the mountains. Our main focus will be on El Ruby. I mean, that was our discovery. This is what has been the company maker. Again, you can see some of the discovery, grades and widths and different things that we see there. You can see the man-portable drill rigs that we use. This is very important from an environmental standpoint. We're permitted to work all over the entire project, but we are very cautious. We use all the lumber. You can see there's the pad we reuse on the next pad. When we're done, we throw down some grass seed, and really you can barely tell that we were ever drilling on any of these pads. So it's a great place to work. We've got good relationships and have been able to comfortably permit our entire time on the project. Here, we're not dealing with ejido like you often are in Mexico. On this particular project, we deal with private ranchers. And in particular, there's one ranch that encompasses all of the El Ruby and the northern half of the project. And then there's a couple of ranches down on the southern end that, we have access agreements that we deal with, just to, get up to El Ruby. One of the things that we've noticed at El Ruby that has been unique for us, given our decades of experience in Mexico, but has been the amount of visible gold we found within that El Ruby area. Obviously, you see visible gold, it's going to bode very well for your assays, but this image was taken through a microscope, and it's very interesting how that visible gold is forming, here in the mineralization. It's, again, something that's led us to believe we're onto a different type of system, which Dolores is one of these types of systems, but they exist around the world and are very interesting, but not that typical in Mexico. These breccia structures that, where you get this visible gold and other things. We're very high up in one of these systems here at El Ruby, and one of the things that we'll be testing later, which we'll talk about probably on one of this next slide, is what we're going to be working towards, here, and what we're going to be testing at the end of the year. All of our drilling right now has been, all where up to the resource was focused here in these andesites. That's definitely the most favorable horizon that we've had to date for mineralization for the wider widths and grades. Since we came out with that resource, we've been testing kind of the bottom end of those andesites, but really the testing now into the rhyolite package on the upper rhyolites below El Ruby. So far what we've seen visually is that it is definitely still mineralized. It's a much harder, not as brittle rock, so you don't get these big wide widths that you get up in the andesites. But I guess the main thing here is that we're still slowing the system down. And what's really exciting moving forward is going to be testing the contact between the rhyolites and the metasediments. And so we're going to be running a deep geophysics program that's been unfortunately delayed from when we originally, hired the company to do it. Just COVID and the amount of time it takes to get import permits in Mexico has been, a frustration that we've dealt with now for the last couple of years under COVID. But Quantec, the company that's doing it, has got those permits in place now. They're going to be doing that geophysics program at the end of October. And then on the back end of that, that'll give us an idea of where that contact is. And we'll be testing that metasediments package. But if you're, putting it on, hypothetically, it's somewhere undercover here. We don't think it'll be too deep. And on these types of deposits, that is typically your bonanza zones that you get. One of the funds that took a large investment in us on our last private placement was Crescat and Quentin Hennig. And Quentin Hennig looked at, what we found so far at Ruby. And he says, when he was at Newmont, they called these gold carbonate base metal systems. And from what we've hit so far, you would say, well, there's no carbonates and there's virtually no base metals. But this is typical of these deposits around the world. Dolores is one of these types of deposits. Another one that I think is an absolute lookalike for it is the Kellyan mine in Indonesia. And you see the signature elements and what they've done there. And it's at that contact where these mines became these large multi-million ounce gold deposits, and where they hit their best bonanza grades was at that contact between the rhyolites and the metasediments. So we're very excited to get that geophysics done. We're going to bring in a much larger rig to do that work, to do those deeper holes that we'll be drilling, on that, testing that contact. That's something very much to look forward to. Like I said, in the interim, while we're doing that geophysics, we're going to be testing some of those targets that have never seen a drill before, in La Colmena and Peridones, where we've seen breccia structures at surface. They sit on parallel trends to the El Ruby trend that runs all the way to the historic area. So again, shows lots of potential. And if we can make a discovery on one or both of those, zones, with the potential to be another El Ruby in itself, it would just speak further to the potential of this project growing in size. Again, I mentioned that the contact will be where there's bonanza grades potentially, but we've hit what I would already have considered potentially some bonanza grades, up on that main El Ruby structure and the breccia structure. So we're looking forward again to testing it. I won't spend too much time, obviously, on this slide. People can go back and look through our deck, and if you want to dive into the various grades and widths that we've seen along the El Ruby structure. What we do get is a combination. We get the main El Ruby structure, which can be anywhere from 1 or 2 meters up to 20 meters wide. Then above and beyond that structure, you get a halo of low-grade mineralization. Combine that with our western zone, which is 100 meters west of the main El Ruby structure. In that zone, you get the 100+ meters of width of that kind of 1 to 1.5 gram rock in that. And so that's what's shown that open pit potential for that El Ruby area. But also, you want to follow those high grade structures down deeper that exist in that, either in our stringer structures or that main El Ruby structure itself. And with that, we'll be developing an underground resource, which will be, the drilling that we're doing now, combined also with, what we can see as we move deeper and find that contact between the rhyolites and the metasediments. Again, here you can see, kind of what the pit model that existed on that, our maiden resource, both in the historic area of the project, where you can see there's a lot of ounces that are definitely still outside of those pits due to the terrain. It's not as favorable for open pit mining. But with our pit at El Ruby, we really, encountered almost all of the mineralization. You can see a few bits of the block model that were just outside of the pit. Those particular blocks there were actually very high-grade blocks. I think when we ran that was about 8,000 tons of 15-gram gold and 300 silver in those blocks, which again will be adapted as we move forward and expand with the drilling. But that shows you the potential of what we could start seeing in a potential underground resource moving forward. And again, you can see the blocks here outside of the pits in the historic area on that bottom image there. So lots of room. Again, I think our pit shells were done at 1650 gold. If you see a run in metals, then you're going to start to recover a lot more ounces potentially in that historic area as well. This section was actually the section that really started to show us the potential that we were onto something very different than your traditional epithermal system in Mexico. The system itself is epithermal in nature, but what you would typically get when you're in an epithermal system is when you see the high-grade gold and silver with no base metals up high in the zone, and then you move down 300 meters and you still see the high-grade gold and silver with virtually no base metals. When you hit that deeper zone there, you should be in the rich base metals, starting to have your gold and silver numbers drop off. So we have this epithermal system, but there's something different that's feeding it that's, making it react differently than the token standard epithermal system that you see all over Mexico. And that's where we really started thinking. And then, we had our meetings with Quentin and he started relating it to his past, successes and experience around the world and came up with a variety of different deposits that, he, reflected on. Like I said, he called them gold carbonate base metals deposit in his time. And so that's why we're really excited again to test that new deeper structure contact point moving forward. A lot of our drilling and this was the drilling up to the resource, you can see the rough pit outline here. Again, in this, we have this large section on the southern end of the pit where we've had some success down in the bottom, that there's about a 300-meter gap here. We've been filling in some of that gap here with the drilling to date post-resource. And so, again, you'll fill in that, add some ounces to the pit. All of our drilling has been expansion in nature. Nothing is infill or we've either are cutting underneath and going underneath these sections, or we're expanding and especially filling in the southern section right now. To the north, we're not going to test that again yet. We do believe this is a down drop block to the north, but we're going to wait again for that geophysics to show the structure, to help guide some of that drilling to the north. But potentially to the north here, from this main El Ruby area up to Ruby North, which all sits in the same trend, there's at least 2 kilometers of strike length potential to the north for El Ruby as well. I mentioned those targets. You can see here where I'll change the color of this actually. You can see down here where the main El Ruby deposit is. I'm just going to circling it broadly there. Like I said, it's 2 kilometers up here to Ruby North. Those targets that we're going to be testing that have never been tested, the first one is La Colmena, which sits here, and this would sit in that parallel trend that lines up with El Molino, as with this Perdones prospect, which sits down here, just up on top of kind of the hill from where El Molino is, down in the bottom of the arroyo. Both of these are very, we've gotten our guys excited. We had identified La Colmena late in our sampling, months ago. This Perdones target, the guys actually identified while they were cutting lines for that geophysics program. So, and they stumbled upon to a multi-meter wide breccia surface. So again, very interesting target. It's interesting that it sits in the same parallel trend that we identified at El Molino. There's some other stuff in the historic area that lines up in that trend. So we'll do a reconnaissance program like we did in El Ruby, kind of 5 to 10 drill holes at each target, see, what we see, wait for the assays, and then, if we hit, then that's when we'll add rigs and, leave rigs solely focused on those targets and start to delineate them the same way we have at El Ruby. Obviously, another major, part of, proving something up to be a mine is the metallurgy. And in our first pass here with the bottle roll test, it showed that the rock leaches very well. 90 to 95% recoveries on gold across all the different grade ranges, and even silver leaching, from 62 to 76%, and the 76% being in our lowest grade silver sample. Very important and bodes, extremely well to this being a successful open pit heap leach operation at surface. We're still working on additional network that will relate back to the underground and showing, again, a much higher percentage above and beyond this for silver recoveries. Obviously, there's that main El Ruby structure, which has extremely high grades, and you wouldn't necessarily want that material to report to a leach pad. So we'd be looking at, we're looking at ore sorting and scanning and various other metrics that could, further improve the metrics of what we've already found. But when you're comparing apples to apples here and talking about open pit heap leach operations, I think we're off to a fantastic start. The average open pit mine in this area starts at about, 500,000 grams of gold equivalent. They operate about a 0.5 gram gold average grade. And we've already, obviously surpassed both of those thresholds with, a grade that's almost, double to triple that, on an equivalent basis between gold and silver, and size-wise, we're already up to, a very healthy number on gold, bigger than that 500,000. We're about 700,000 gold equivalent. So very exciting start for us, but again, it's still open along strike, still open along depth. We've got all of our other targets that'll feed in this. We have the historic area, which can still be expanded upon. Still lots to find and discover on this project. The company sits within a group called the Belcara Group. At the moment, we have 3 public companies under our group's management, Silver Viper, obviously, and then we have Barcelle Minerals and Oryx Minerals. Barcelle is, a very advanced development gold project in Sweden, where we've got 2.5 million ounces right now in a resource. And what I would say, I could go into those projects, but we're focused on Silver Viper today. But what's important is the G&A cost, that being part of a group like this, being able to have, 3 senior geologists on staff here that take the lead on each company, but they're able to bounce ideas off of each other, relate them to their experience around the world between Dale, Art, and Ben. The group's model is very important, and it's the same across all of our companies. And we don't look to put something into production ourselves. We understand that we're very good explorers and making discoveries. And so the model that really showed that the best was Oracle Silver, a project that we put the very first drill hole into, grew it to over 270 million ounces of silver, and then ultimately sold it in a bidding war between Coeur and First Majestic for over 350 million US. A group is very well respected amongst the majors. We've had partnerships with Hecla, Pan American Silver multiple times, Fresnillo, Agnico Eagle, Coeur, First Majestic. They all know and respect the level of work and experience that our geologists have. And oftentimes we get access to projects that no one else would, because these groups come to us first, or they'll want to get involved with us at a much earlier stage than they would a lot of our peer group, because again, they know, that we don't mess around. We like to grow organically our share prices, and when we do it through the value of the drill rig and proving up, resources and deposits. Just quickly here, you can see, our share structure. Again, a pretty attractive model. We've done every financing we've done has been done at a higher price than the one before it. Typically, there's not too many unhappy shareholders with the company. They've done very well with their investment, and there has been a little pullback recently, like everyone else, I think, with the summer and what hit. It's just summer doldrums hit during COVID times here, so we've had a bit of a pullback in share price from recent highs. But again, we're well capitalized and continue to explore. I think it's a very good opportunity, if not even in our company, but in any of the companies who identify as high quality gold and silver right now. I think you're getting in at a discounted rate based on what we just went through this summer with the market, and I think we're at a point where gold and silver are due for another large breakout. And obviously, anyone who's invested in a quality junior is going to do very well, because the companies always outperform the metals on the way up. So again, another thing that we're very proud of is our institutional holdings here. There's about 20 funds that own the stock. They have all been very long, supportive. They're some of the most quality funds in the industry. Obviously, Crescat grew their position on that last raise, and we've already talked about the reasons why, and we're excited to have them. And as we move forward and start to put out news on kind of that deeper discoveries, again, they're one that's very good at marketing the different companies that they are ownerships in. But we've had Commodity Capital has been very supportive. Sprott Asset Management, the silver fund there, is also another one that's been very supportive. So Ingalls and Snyder, US Global, these are the who's who of investors in our space. Management, I should say, you see 20%. Another staple of the Belcara Group is management owning over 20% of all the companies. We're very aggressive at buying in the market. And supporting our stocks. We think the best place is to invest in ourselves. And then our retail position has actually been growing, especially in the US. We've had a lot of success here over the last year, especially after we upgraded and got our OTCQB listing, that we've seen a very large following of US retail building that's hasn't been there for a lot of years in our space, but they're taking notice of, especially on the silver side, what's happening in the world, and wanting to get behind the quality names that are out there. In summary, we've got a high quality asset. We're in a great mining friendly jurisdiction. We've got a great management technical team in the project, lots of blue sky potential, strong shareholder support, and we're well financed to continue to drill. With that, I think we could open it up to questions, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking time today to listen to the story.
Great. Thank you very much. Markets softened a bit since the summer and into end of September here. What are you reading? What do you hear?
I mean,
not your opinion, but what's the range of views that you pick up as an insider in your industry?
It was very noticeable that we were going to have a hard summer doldrums with travel restrictions slowly starting to ease. People have been so focused on these companies leading up to the start of summer that the second the travel restriction was uncanny. Like, emails stopped, phone calls stopped, people were gone and checked out for the summer. And so we've seen these, for the most part, pretty low volumes throughout the summer across the industry. And, some share prices have been softer and they've come off on low volume. But I think it sets it up to, take some pretty dramatic jumps moving forward here. And again, I think there's a lot happening in the world right now that's going to, finally lead to gold and silver having their breakout. As far as, I think we all know silver is long overdue for its breakout, and they both had their recent pullbacks as, for whatever reasons. We can go with that. That's a whole nother presentation in itself if we want to talk about why gold and silver are off and manipulation or whatever else is happening. But there are other people in the sector that you can listen to that go far more into depth on those fronts. But I do think we're coming to the end of that. I think, just what's happening in the world, that we are primed, especially for silver, to have a very dramatic breakout. And again, I would, tell people that when we have those types of breakouts in our space, there's a lot of, wealth creation for investors that get in early. And again, I wouldn't say just invest in us, invest in your best 10 companies, your best 20 companies and management teams, and place your bets. And I think everyone will do very well.
I not necessarily think there are 20 great putting it to 10. I one time said 50, and they said 50. They're like 10 that look at it. Anyway. How much drilling have you done since March 10th, Steve, and when might you expect to release more results? And,
I don't know the exact meterage number, but I would say we're 5,000 plus meters probably since March 10th, maybe a bit more. As far as the next results, I would expect to have kind of a release of those drilling that we were doing in the rhyolites here in the next week or two. We've definitely finally had some trickle of results in, and it was probably a good point before we move up to the other targets to do kind of a summary release of results from that packet from what we've been focused on here in the rhyolites. It has been painfully slow for us though with the lab, and I think it might be starting to speed up a little bit right now again as people are kind of getting back to work, and it seems that we're getting some stuff quicker, though I hedge that because obviously everyone's drilling now in the Golden Triangle and has been for a while, so that can slow down labs as we get the rush of all those, because all of our materials and a lot of our stuff around the world ends up in North Van or on the multi-elements, and you're competing with all these other areas. But again, it does seem to be picking up a bit, and I think you'll see an assay release here shortly. And then on the back end of that, it'll be, probably another release once we've done our kind of reconnaissance program. We'll have a release on the geophysics, summarizing kind of the work there, and probably I would expect announcing, adding an additional rig to do that deeper testing on those targets.
People have asked about the future. Assays pending. Can you review drill plans for the balance of 2021 and then 8 months after that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exploration. I think I kind of answered that a bit in the previous answer, but I would think going in with one rig drilling for this whole year, we were expecting to do about 20,000 meters this year. We've done probably half of that or close to already. Again, I think if we're adding a rig and doing the deeper testing, that number probably grows, and we probably do more than 20,000 meters this year. Again, like I said, that geophysics program starts at the end of October. That's going to take a month to complete. You get most of that information back fairly quickly on that type of geophysics and the deeper magnetotellurics. So we'll be expecting to drill, that deep contact right on the back end. So say we start drilling the deep contact in end of November, early December, come out with those results, hopefully, in January, the following year. And then in the meantime, fingers crossed, but we make a new discovery and we keep the, at least one or two rigs going on those, if we make some new discoveries, each new discovery will warrant keeping a rig on it and continuing to delineate and expand on a new discovery. So it's exploration. I can't tell you exactly what the plan is because we haven't even made those discoveries yet, but that's kind of what we're thinking, and we'll see, as we get results, as we see the core, how we adapt and change on that front.
Great. I'm going to pass you over to the research group of a geologist and an engineer. So good luck. Adam?
There we go.
Yeah.
I may have missed the beginning of the presentation, but can you just walk us through the the land tenor and royalties and any arrangements or understandings you have with the local etos?
So like I mentioned, we don't deal with any ejido here. There is an ejido off to the eastern side of the project, and we have some of them in our workforce that work with us. But in this particular area, we only deal with private ranchers. So we have one rancher that essentially controls, if you can see this slide again now, but about all of this and surrounding area is controlled by one rancher. And then there's a couple of ranchers that we use for our land access here on the south. So we have our agreements in place, for all of our drilling and everything and land access to get up to this area. That's all we deal with in that. I mean, like you say, you see the option agreement. We gave Pan American a 2% NSR project-wide, which gave us 100% ownership of everything in red. And then we have this back-end option agreement that we made the first 3 payments on for the blue claims that has where all the historic work was done and the bulk of our El Ruby work. And like I said, that final payment, half of that can be paid in shares. There's also a 2% NSR that's just on those blue claims that we have the right to buy back for $2 million in the first 5 years of the agreement. So we have 2 years left on that to pay $2 million to buy out that NSR, or $3 million for the life of the project after that. We can buy that 2% NSR.
So just to sum up, you got 2% on the red, 2% on the blue, and then another 2% on the blue that you can buy back. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So one NSR is 2% on everything, blue and red combined. And then there's another 2% NSR which we can buy back that is just on the blue.
Gotcha. So assuming you buy it back, you got 2% on everything.
We have 2% on the blue if we buy back. The buyback one is only on the blue.
So you can buy back the 2% on the blue, and you'll have nothing. You'll have no royalties left on the blue.
Well, there's a 2% NSR which we cannot buy back that covers the whole project, blue and red. We cannot buy that back. That's in Pan American. The NSR that is solely on the blue is the one that we can buy back.
Oh, okay. So, thank you.
Yeah. So the project will be.
Can you walk through sort of your high-level exploration plans for the next 12 months?
Yeah, like I said, it obviously with us and the potential for new discoveries that can very much change. But the plan right now is, again, to, on the back end of the geophysics, which will be done from the end of October kind of through November, is to test that deep contact of the rhyolites and the metasediments. Again, based on success or what we're seeing, it's going to dictate how much meterage and what we, budget towards that. But if we hit what we believe we could hit based on the other deposits like this around the world, then there's going to be a lot of focus and a lot of meters drilled there. I mean, some of that meterage will depend on how deep that contact is as well, which is what we're looking to that geophysics to kind of show us exactly where that contact is. So our geologists don't think it's going to be too deep here. So is it 800 meters below surface? Is it 500? Is it a kilometer? Well, I mean, we'll see that in the geophysics, and that'll obviously dictate how deep those holes are and how many meters you're, delineating to it in those holes. In the interim and moving forward while we do that, we're going to be testing some of our other, we want to get the rig obviously out of the way while we're doing that month-long geophysics program. So it's going to move up to those exploration targets that have never been tested initially in La Colmena and Perdones. And those are 5 to 10 hole, in each target type of program, anywhere from 150 to kind of 300 meter type holes, again, depending on what we see in that area. And then, I would expect that rig to actually go to the southern end of Macho Libre. There's some new stuff that they found there and mapping and sampling that they also want to test. So any of those make a discovery and an obvious discovery, then that's going to keep a rig and, start delineating, expanding on those. So again, it's a very fluid guess on how many meters we're going to be drilling. But again, I would expect, we did 20,000 meters last year. We were, started this year kind of saying we would do at least that again. And I would expect that we definitely at least do that again, if not more.
Could you sort of say or give us an idea of, what you guys would have to outline as far as a total, resource before you move forward for a PEA, and is the exploration going to be, largely targeting, open pit type resources, underground resources, and do you have different thresholds for either?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we want to find the boundaries of El Ruby for sure before we do a PEA as far as the pit's concerned and expanding. And again, so we'll see that GFix will help, especially on the northern end of that pit and expanding to the north, identifying the structure, because again, we think we're in a down drop block there. I would say it's a combo of we're certainly trying to define a maiden underground resource here on the next resource update whenever that comes, and then continue to expand on that open pit resource at El Ruby, and then again, like I said, hopefully we make a new discovery and can start including another target in the next resource. Obviously, with that deep drilling, that's all underground. That's something you'd be targeting, sinking a shaft ultimately when you mine it and going and targeting something deeper. But, if that hits, that's going to see a lot of focus on the project, targeting that deeper contact between the rhyolites and the metasediments and what that could mean for the deposit. As far as size, we're already at a size of the resource in the open pit at Ruby that you could justify a PEA. So again, once we've found those boundaries, again, I think that would be something that probably comes in the next resource, that there would be a PEA done, at least on the open pit side of things and showing the economics there. And from a sales standpoint of when, again, the average, I think I've heard this from numerous people now, but most of the open pit deposits that are heap leach, in this part of the world started about 500,000 ounces of gold equivalent, and then they just kind of start mining and going. So I think we've already hit a threshold that would appeal to some of those mid-tier producers that want to jump in on these types of deposits if we don't find the deeper contacts. But that being said, there's a lot of the big major mining companies that have definitely taken notice of what we've already put out and are monitoring us very closely.
Based on the conceptual pit that you guys are using to constrain the El Ruby resource, what would the stripping ratio be?
Yeah, I asked that question to our geologist today. It wasn't included in that resource. We went back and looked through it, but from running the numbers ourselves, we're looking at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5-1 right now. But that'll change as we fill in that southern end of Ruby, which as with the drilling fills it in, and you're seeing that part of the pit here that's got nothing in it. So that number should only come down as far as the ratio, but somewhere 5 right now. It's probably 5, 6, 7 to 1. I don't know the number exactly because it wasn't done, but I would expect it to come down to that 5 to 1 or less number by the time it's all said and done.
How are you doing your cutoff? Are you doing it on
the independent used a dollar per ton number. Yeah, to base, the different, the underground and we don't have it in there, but he was using a dollar per ton, which equated essentially to about 0.3 grams gold cutoff.
It's pretty low, don't you think?
Well, again, most of those deposits in that area are using a lower cutoff than that, so they're 0.1, 0.2 type deposits for the open pit heap leach stuff. The average grade of those deposits is about 0.5 gram when you start looking at all the open pit heap leach mines. So,
I mean, it's going to cost you, even if you're going all downhill, it's still going to cost you, $2 to $3 a ton just to move rock.
Yeah,
seems low.
Like I said, the people that in the mining companies we've had look at it are thrilled with it. So, like I say, we're not the miners, but one of the things we always rely on, the guys have been out to site and they've been very excited about what we found so far and grades and in that area. So I'll stick with that. But yeah, like I said, the average deposit, it operates in that area at about 0.5 gram gold average grade and uses lower cutoffs than we're using.
Very good. Let me pass it on to Erdy for any questions that he has.
Thank you. Steve, how expensive for you to identify a target you think when you compare yourself with other explorers in the area?
Expense to identify a target? I mean, it's pretty inexpensive to identify. I mean, like the new targets were done, just on general mapping and sampling programs. I don't know what our cost to identify would be, but all of our targets so far have been found on those mapping and sampling programs. It's not, being found by AI or some of these other methods that certain groups are using that I think are probably more expensive and cost you in the long run. It's been just putting the boots on the ground and getting the guys, walking lines and running, very large sampling lines across all that northern part of the project. El Ruby was identified right off the bat, and especially here, when you see the large silicified dikes sticking out of the ground, it's a good place to start. So it doesn't take too much to vector in on some of these good targets. I don't know what our cost would be, but I would bet that we're lower than most of our peers on that front.
I see. And when we look at the targets you identified so far today, and do you think, can you give us any like a hit or miss ratio when you look at the results?
I would say we obviously had a major hit at El Ruby. We've got sniffs of mineralization both at Ruby North, El Molino, and Macho Libre. I wouldn't classify any of the mineralization that we've hit at any of those three, even though they were the first drill holes put into all those targets, as being discoveries. They've all hit the structure. They've all hit mineralization. It just wasn't running at the same grade that El Ruby was. And on a number of them, we believe that we're high in the system and need to go deeper to get to that favorable horizon that El Ruby sits in on them. So I mean, from that perspective, I guess we've hit on 1 out of 4 as far as a true discovery. And but I'd say there's far more to it than that, because I think we want to follow up on some of those targets, and we've definitely seen things that would intrigue us, and we do believe that there are, additional deposits at all 3 of those other ones that we'll call a miss right now, but there's definitely more there.
Is there any drilling challenges there because of the topography?
No, I mean, again, the topography is very favorable at El Ruby. You're sitting, it's flat. We've talked to the geologist or to the drilling company, and there were times when we've built pads on the sides of those hills, and they kind of, when we have been on the sides of the hill, and they've kind of said, you think this is tough, you should see most of the stuff that we're drilling a lot in Mexico around. So, obviously topography is always something, and how you service it, how you get supplies to it. In our case, at Ruby, we use mules to bring in the fuel to carry the core out. It's worked very well. There's been certainly no delays or anything along that front. So I don't think that there's no challenges that says you can't absolutely get into an area. There's areas that the roads are further from that you'll have to probably set up more of like a satellite camp for the drillers, because they're not going to be coming all the way back to the main camp every shift. But it's all very drillable. And like I said, we've had water year round, which is huge. So there's never, we pause for a day here and there if we get kind of, those arroyos filling up with too much water too quickly on the back end of rains. Kind of, I won't call it a flash flood, but certainly something that you don't want to be hiking across those arroyos when the water is ripping. But no, we've been able to drill year round, and I think we can drill anywhere on the project if we, want to.
Thank you. That's all from me. Campbell?
Sure. We've gone through the questions and your line of questions, and kind of want to thank everyone for joining and for your great questions. And we really would love your feedback. So make your way to that feedback box there now, and share this event. The link works for the live and the replay. It's all the same link in the end. Put it on social media, email it to your buddies, whatever. Get the word out. Really appreciate it. Passing it back. Oh, and the replay will be available in about an hour and a half. Passing it back to Steve to give us the closes. So.
Yeah, we talked about it a bit at the beginning, and I'd like to thank everyone again for taking the time to listen today, and to Amvest for putting on the event. We always enjoy it. And again, my final comments would just be, I think we are entering a very exciting time in the cycle for precious metals, and, go out, do your due diligence, pick the companies that you think are the best ones out there, and put your money behind, put your bets in, because I think there's gonna be a lot of wealth created. You look at some of the other factors that I think, especially on the silver side, are going to drive silver, where we're talking about the green movement, whether it's electric cars or solar, the infrastructure that's going to be needed to, support that. And, there's not a lot of quality names out there that have any exposure to silver. I mean, Campbell and I kind of joked about it, that 20 is probably too high and the number is probably closer to 10. And you're not going to have that supply of silver, for all those electric car companies, for the people that are producing solar panels. It's going to be needed in electronics and everything else that we do in this world. And the only thing that's going to, start to bring up that supply is if silver prices run a lot higher, and you start bringing in some of these, the deposits that have been around forever that need $50 silver to be economic and to run. So again, I believe that we're at a point here where silver and gold are both going to be breaking out, but especially silver. And, again, there's the junior companies that are successful are always going to outperform the metals prices. So, if you're interested, please reach out to the company or reach out to Amvest, and they'll get us in touch. And we're always available to answer questions or jump on phone calls. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Everyone have a great day, and share the event and give us your feedback. So with that, good day, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.